Welcome, students, and thank you for joining me for another lesson of wrestling history from your professor on Professor Burr's wrestling history class. And today's lesson will talk about the one of the biggest promotions in North American history that you may never have heard of. That promotion was the AWA, the American Wrestling Association. But first, before we dive into it, as always, let me give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Chops Trading Cards, and formerly known as WrestleCult.net, now is Slam. And as always, I cannot forget my tag team partners on the Wrestling Society podcast. Without them, there would be no me. And without you, there will be no us. So, class, are you prepared? Do you have your paper, pens, and pencils ready? Or for you new school aficionados, do you have your phones or your iPads? Let's get ready to dive into this lesson. In the 1948, the NWA, which is the National Wrestling Alliance, was formed. The NWA was a governing body of independent promoters with the head of made up the board of directors. The group operated a territory system which sanctioned various championships, recognizing one world champion, participating in talent exchanges, and collectively protecting the territorial integrity of the members' promotions. Well, in 1960, after unsuccessfully lobbying for the NWA for a title match between Olympic wrestler Greg Gagne and the NWA World Champion Pat O'Connor, Greg Gagne and Wallace Carboni led certain territories out of the NWA to form the AWA. The AWA became one of the most successful and expansive single territories in North America, promoting shows in such major cities as Minnesota, St. Paul, Milwaukee, Chicago, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Denver, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Phoenix, and throughout the Northwest Territory regions. The AWA had a system that believed in pure wrestling at a mat base, which a little different from where the NWA believed in not just mat base, but high flying also. Some of the greatest wrestlers came through and got their start in the NWA. One in particular would go down as arguably the greatest world champion in any organization history. We'll give bonus points if you can guess who this man is. Did you say, woo, the nature boy, Ric Flair? You would be correct. Ric Flair got his start in the AWA. Some other famous wrestlers who came through and helped build themselves to major status would be Dusty Rhodes, Dick Murdoch, Nick Bockwinkel, the Fabulous Freebirds, Jimmy Garvin, Stan Hansen, Wahoo McDaniel, Ken Patera, Harley Race, Jesse the Body Ventura, Larry Sabisco, Bob Orton Jr., Tully Blanchard, Ronnie Garvin, the Road Warriors, Pat Patterson. And another famous guy who helped him to get his big major push is the immortal Hulk Hogan. In 1982, Hulk Hogan was building a big name for himself off the back of his appearance in Rocky III as Thunder Lips with his promotion intermatch between him and Rocky Balboa. Hogan was getting majorly hot and became a fan favorite, which at the time Hogan was challenging for the AWA championship, trying to defeat Nick Bockwinkel with his manager Bobby the Brain Heenan. They had many matches over the years span where Hogan on 2 occasions actually beat Nick Bockwinkel, only for the AWA to overturn it for different reasons. At this time, the WWF would be starting to try to do their national promotion to take over. So, being sold from his father, Vince Kennedy Sr., Vince McMahon decided he wanted Hulk Hogan on his team. Hulk Hogan, and he reached out to Hulk. He eventually signed Hulk Hogan away from the AWA, which at the time, Hulk Hogan did not have a contract with him. The only contract he had was a verbal one. Once Hulk Hogan decided to go with the WWE, Hulk did not show back up to the AWA. Hulk Hogan did send a letter letting them know that he was leaving the promotion, which Vern Gagne thought was a rib, because back in those days, promoters used to rib each other a lot. They had a big match planned for Christmas Day, which back then the major promotions usually would plan big matches on Thanksgiving and Christmas, because that's where they drew most of their money. Hulk Hogan didn't show up, so Vern's son, Greg Gagne, reached out to him to find out what happened. He told them that he had signed with Vince and was going to start there. Greg told Hogan that that was not the way to do business and he should just finish out the remaining dates. Hulk Hogan then informed Greg that Vince paid him so much money to not show up at the events. Unfortunately for the AWA, was a big blow towards their business, but it did not stop them as they continued to build new stars and build from their established stars to keep the company going. But unfortunately, as with Hulk Hogan, a lot of their stars decided to leave. Some of the stars that left are right after Hulk Hogan are names that you are very familiar with. Such names as Mean Gene Okerlund, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Adrian Adonis, Ken Patera, Jim Brunzell, David Schultz, Wendy Richter, and Jesse the Body Ventura. The AWA had required their talent to place a 6-week notice that they were leaving the company because of taping and finishing up angles. Unfortunately, none of the talent had finished up their commitment. The only one that finished up their commitment was Bobby the Brain Heenan. And the reason why the talents didn't is because Vince McMahon paid them more money to sit out than to finish their commitments. As the AWA continued going on, they built new stars and crowned a lot of them champions and to build and go to the next generation. Again, unfortunately, the WWF at the time was able to offer these talents more money and more notoriety. Some of these famous people are Scott Hall, Kurt Hennig, Rick the Model Martel, the Midnight Rockers, aka the Rockers of Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, Sherry Martel, and Medusa. The AWA was able to go on and able to compete only sparingly, falling to the number 3 promotion in the country after the NWA and WWF. The AWA only put on one pay-per-view match in their entirety, which was known as Super Clash 3, which headlined Jerry the King Lawler, the AWA World Champion, and Kerry Von Erich, the world-class World Heavyweight Champion, in a unification bout. The pay-per-view had very low ratings and unfortunately did not help the AWA. The AWA then had a fallout with Jerry the King Lawler and stripped him of the World Championship. Needing a recognizable name, Vern Gagne went to someone he could count on, would be Larry Zbyszko, in turn which Larry Zbyszko was his son-in-law. Unfortunately, it was too late, as the promotion ended up being done in 1991. But notable champions that reigned in the AWA were Kurt Hennig as the World Heavyweight Champion, also as a World Tag Team Champion with partner Scott Hall. The model Rick Martel also was a former AWA World Champion. Stan the Lariat Hansen was also a former World Heavyweight Champion. Sherry Martel was a former Women's World Champion. Medusa was also a former Women's World Champion. The Road Warriors were former World Tag Team Champions. The Midnight Rockers of Shawn Michaels and Mark Jannetty also were former world champions. Some other notable names that got their start in the AWA were Eric Bischoff as an announcer, Diamond Dallas Page as the manager of Bad Company, which in WWE was known as the Orient Express. Paulie Dangerously, aka Paul Heyman, was also a former manager of the original Midnight Express, who also were formerly World Tag Team Champions. Other names that came through the company were Jerry Lynn, the Nasty Boys, Ronnie Garvin, and Pat Patterson, Harley Race, Wahoo McDaniel. In turn, the AWA played a major part of putting wrestling where it is today. Without the AWA, we wouldn't have some of the greatest people in the wrestling business and have their tributes. So, for this, to gain extra points, Professor Bear has a homework assignment. Go look up AWA on YouTube and watch some of the matches. I guarantee you, you will learn to love and understand where some of this stuff comes from. You will see angles that were portrayed in in WWF that was originally done in the AWA. I think it'll be a good time and a good lesson for you. Well, that's it for today's lesson. But remember, the knowledge we gain today will always be able to look back and learn where it came from. To be a true wrestling fan, learn about the past so you can enjoy the present to appreciate the future. And with that, Professor Bird gives you a salute, and as always, keep learning.